I want to start with a hard truth, one that many of us don't like to admit. At some point, we've all been pulled into the orbit of someone who made us question our reality. Maybe it was a boss who always took credit but never responsibility. Maybe it was a friend who turned every conversation into a monologue about their own greatness. Or maybe, just maybe, it was someone closer. Someone whose love felt like a prize you had to win over and over again. Now, we don't like to talk about it because, let's be honest, calling out narcissistic behavior can feel like walking through a minefield. But here's the thing. Understanding it isn't about labeling people or diagnosing them. It's about protecting your peace, recognizing manipulation, and setting boundaries that honor your own self-worth. So today, we're going to talk about 5 key ways to recognize narcissistic behavior in everyday life. Because when you can name it, you can navigate it. First, the Charm-Disarm Cycle is one of the most confusing and emotionally exhausting patterns of narcissistic behavior. At first, it feels incredible. They make you feel seen, chosen, like you're the most important person in the room. And let's be honest, that feels good. Whether it's a boss who praises you as their right-hand person, a friend who showers you with attention, or a partner who makes you believe you found the kind of love people write songs about, the beginning is intoxicating. But here's where it shifts. Slowly, sometimes so subtly, you don't even notice it at first. The warmth starts to fade. The compliments turn into critiques. The admiration into condescension. And the sense of being cherished starts feeling more like you're being tested. You find yourself working harder to get back to that original version of them, the one who made you feel special. And that's the hook. That's where the cycle keeps you trapped, because the person you fell for, the one who was kind and affirming and generous with their words, was never really the full picture. Here's what we know from research. Narcissists are experts at mirroring. They reflect back to you the exact qualities you want to see. If you value deep conversations, they'll talk about the meaning of life with you for hours. If you love humor, they'll have you laughing until your stomach hurts. It's not just manipulation, it's strategy. They build a connection fast and deep because they need you to trust them quickly. But here's the kicker. It's not about you. It's about control. About getting you to believe in the version of them that they want you to see. The moment you stop giving them the validation they crave, when you start setting boundaries, questioning their actions, or simply needing something in return, that's when the disarming begins. The warmth turns cold, the charm turns into subtle digs, dismissive comments, or outright withdrawal, and suddenly you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? And that's the real trick of the Charm-Disarm Cycle. It makes you question yourself more than them. It keeps you in a loop of trying to get back to the good times, convincing yourself that if you just say the right thing, do the right thing, or be the right person, they'll return to the way they were at the start. But that's not how real, healthy relationships work. Healthy people don't punish you for having needs. They don't make affection a reward you have to earn. So how do you break the cycle? Awareness is the first step. If someone's attention feels too good to be true, if they rush emotional intimacy, or if you feel like you're on a roller coaster of being idealized one moment and ignored the next, that's your cue to pause, to check in with yourself and ask, is this connection making me feel safe, or am I constantly trying to prove my worth? Because here's what I know for sure. Real connection isn't about being tested. It's about being seen, fully, flaws and all, and still being valued. Anything less isn't love. It's control dressed up as love, and you deserve better than that. Second, lack of empathy. True connection requires vulnerability, but narcissists struggle with empathy. They minimize your feelings, dismiss your pain, or turn your emotions into a weakness. Empathy, the ability to truly see and feel another person's experience, is the foundation of every healthy relationship. It's what makes us feel safe, valued, and understood. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, empathy is either absent or weaponized. Instead of meeting you with understanding, they meet you with indifference, judgment, or worse, manipulation. Here's what that looks like in everyday life. You open up about a rough day at work, and instead of listening, they immediately one-up you. You think that's bad? You should hear what I had to deal with. Or maybe you express hurt over something they said, and instead of apologizing, they roll their eyes and tell you you're overreacting. They don't hold space for your emotions. Instead, they minimize, deflect, or make it about them. And when you live in that dynamic long enough, something dangerous happens. You start questioning whether your feelings even matter. You shrink yourself. You stop expressing disappointment, frustration, or sadness because somewhere along the way you learned that it wasn't safe to do so. And that's exactly what narcissistic behavior thrives on. The less you express, the easier it is for them to maintain control. But let's talk about the deeper layer here. Why narcissists struggle with empathy in the first place. Research shows that narcissistic behavior is often a defense mechanism, a mask to cover deep feelings of insecurity and shame. The reason they can't fully engage with your emotions is because they don't know how to engage with their own. Admitting fault, showing vulnerability, or even just sitting with someone else's pain feels like a threat to their carefully constructed identity. So instead of leaning in, they push away. Instead of owning mistakes, they blame. Instead of saying, "I hear you," they make you feel like you're asking for too much. And let's be clear, this is not about excusing their behavior. Understanding why someone lacks empathy doesn't mean you have to tolerate it. What it does mean is that you don't have to take it personally. Their inability to meet you with care is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their limitations. So what do you do when you're faced with someone who lacks empathy? First, you stop seeking emotional validation from them. If every time you open up you're met with dismissal or judgment, you have to recognize that this is not a safe space for your emotions. You start turning to people who can meet you with kindness and understanding, friends, family, or even just yourself. And second, you set boundaries, not as punishment, not as an attempt to change them, but as a way of protecting your own emotional well-being. Because at the end of the day, you deserve to be in relationships, whether romantic, professional, or platonic, where your emotions are valued, not used against you. Empathy isn't just nice to have in a relationship, it's the foundation. And when it's missing, the cracks will always start to show. Third, the blame game is a hallmark of narcissistic behavior. If you've ever felt like every argument ends with you apologizing, even when you know you were right, you might be dealing with someone who refuses accountability. Accountability is hard for all of us. Owning our mistakes, admitting when we've hurt someone, and making amends requires a level of vulnerability that isn't always comfortable. But for most people, it's a part of growing, of strengthening relationships, of becoming better. For a narcissist, though, accountability feels like a direct attack on their identity, because in their world, being wrong isn't an option. Instead of taking responsibility, they shift the blame, twist the facts, or turn the entire situation around until suddenly you are the one in the hot seat. It can be subtle at first. Maybe you bring up something they said that hurt you, and instead of listening, they sigh and say, "You're always so sensitive." Or maybe you catch them in a lie, and rather than admitting it, they turn it into an attack. "Why do you always assume the worst of me?" It doesn't take long before you start second guessing yourself. Am I overreacting? Am I being unfair? Did I actually do something wrong? That's the power of the blame game. It shifts the focus off of them and onto you. And over time, if you're not careful, you start carrying responsibility for things that were never yours to carry in the first place. Here's what we know from research. Narcissistic behavior is deeply tied to shame avoidance. The idea of being seen as flawed, wrong, or at fault is unbearable. So instead of confronting their mistakes, they rewrite the narrative. And if you're close to them, if you care about them, if you want to keep the peace, you might find yourself stepping into the role they've assigned you. The problem solver, the fixer, the one who smooths things over even at the expense of your own truth. I want to pause here because this is important. When you repeatedly take the blame just to keep the peace, it doesn't actually keep the peace. It just transfers the weight of their shame onto you. It teaches them that they never have to be accountable because someone else will always carry the burden for them. So what do you do when you're stuck in this cycle? The first step is recognizing it for what it is. If you find yourself constantly apologizing, constantly defending yourself, constantly feeling like you're at fault, even when deep down you know you're not, pay attention. That's not conflict resolution. That's manipulation. And then you start reclaiming your truth. That means resisting the urge to over-explain yourself. It means standing firm in what you know to be real. It means saying, I'm not responsible for your reactions, and letting that be enough. Because the truth is, accountability isn't about proving who's right or wrong. It's about growth. And real, healthy relationships are built with people who are willing to own their part. If someone is always pointing the finger at you, never willing to look in the mirror, that's not a relationship. That's a performance where only one person ever gets to be the hero and the other is stuck playing the villain. And you don't have to accept that role. Fourth, gaslighting and reality distortion are some of the most insidious tools of narcissistic behavior. That never happened. You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. These phrases aren't just frustrating, they're designed to make you doubt yourself. Gaslighting isn't just lying, it's rewriting reality. It's when someone systematically chips away at your confidence in your own memory, perception, and instincts. And it's not always dramatic. Most of the time it happens in small, everyday moments. You remember a conversation one way, they insist it happened another. You express frustration about something they did, they tell you it never happened. You bring up a valid concern, they make you feel like you're crazy for even thinking it. It's not a disagreement. It's an intentional shifting of reality so that over time, you stop trusting yourself. And here's where it gets really painful. Gaslighting is most effective when it comes from someone you love or deeply respect. If a stranger on the street told you that you imagined something, you'd brush it off. But when it's a partner, a friend, a boss, or even a parent, it's different. Because on some level, we want to believe that the people we care about have our best interests at heart. So when they tell us that we're remembering things wrong, or that we're being dramatic, or that we're blowing things out of proportion, we start to wonder if maybe they're right. And that's the goal. Because the more you doubt yourself, the easier it is for them to control, the easier it is for them to get away with hurtful behavior. The easier it is for them to avoid accountability. Gaslighting isn't about the truth, it's about power. It's about making sure that their version of events is the only one that matters. Here's what we know from research. The most dangerous part of gaslighting isn't the lie itself, it's what it does to your sense of self. When someone repeatedly denies your reality, you start to disconnect from your own instincts. You hesitate before speaking up. You overanalyze every thought and feeling. You start apologizing for things that weren't even your fault. You shrink. And that's not just frustrating, it's deeply damaging because trust in ourselves is everything. It's how we navigate relationships, make decisions, and protect our well-being. When that trust is broken, when we start outsourcing our own reality to someone who doesn't have our best interests at heart, we lose a critical part of ourselves. So how do you break free from gaslighting? It starts with recognizing it for what it is. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, if you feel like you have to record conversations just to prove they happened, if you feel drained and confused after every interaction, those are red flags. Pay attention to them. Your feelings are not overreactions. Your memories are not invalid just because someone else refuses to acknowledge them. And then you start reclaiming your truth. That might mean keeping a journal so you have a written record of what really happened. It might mean saying, I know what I heard, I know what I felt, and not letting them twist it. It might mean stepping away from conversations that leave you feeling lost instead of seen. Because here's the truth, healthy relationships don't require you to abandon yourself. They don't make you feel crazy for trusting your own experiences. The people who truly love you won't ask you to erase your reality just to make them more comfortable. And when you start trusting yourself again, when you start believing that your perspective is valid, that's when you take your power back. Fifth, control disguised as love is one of the most deceptive and painful forms of manipulation. Whether it's through guilt, the silent treatment, or withholding affection, narcissists make you feel like love is something you have to earn. But real love doesn't come with conditions. At first, it doesn't feel like control. It feels like deep care, like they just want the best for you. I don't want you hanging out with those people because they don't treat you right. I only get upset because I love you so much. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't do that. These words don't sound cruel on the surface. In fact, they can sound protective, even romantic. But over time, that protection starts to feel suffocating. The love starts to feel fragile, like it can be taken away at any moment if you don't follow the unspoken rules. That's how control works. It doesn't show up as a demand, it shows up as an expectation. One you learn to meet to avoid conflict, disapproval, or withdrawal. Maybe you stop seeing certain friends because it's easier than dealing with their jealousy. Maybe you start dressing differently because you don't want to be criticized. Maybe you silence parts of yourself, your passions, your opinions, because every time you express them, there's an emotional consequence. You start shaping yourself around what makes them comfortable. And that's not love. That's control wrapped in affection. And let's talk about one of the most common tactics, withholding. When a narcissist doesn't get their way, they don't always explode. Sometimes they go silent. They pull back affection, ignore you, make you feel like you've done something wrong, even if you don't know what it is. And the worst part, they won't tell you. They'll just let you sit in the discomfort, waiting, wondering what you did, trying to fix something you don't even understand. Because when love is used as a reward, withholding it becomes a punishment. And that punishment is designed to make you fall in line. Here's what we know from research. Healthy love doesn't operate on scarcity. It's not something you have to perform for, chase after, or beg to keep. Love, real love, doesn't keep score. It doesn't make you feel like you have to earn your place in someone's life by being smaller, quieter, or easier to control. Love is freely given, not conditionally granted. So how do you recognize control disguised as love? You ask yourself a simple question. Does this love make me feel free, or does it make me feel trapped? Does it allow me to be fully myself, or am I constantly trying to prove that I'm enough? Because if love feels like a test you can never quite pass, then it's not love. It's control. And here's the truth. Love that requires you to give up pieces of yourself isn't love at all. You deserve relationships where you can be fully seen, fully valued, and fully loved without condition. Narcissistic behavior thrives in spaces where doubt replaces trust, where control is mistaken for care, and where love feels like something you have to earn instead of something that is freely given. But here's what I need you to know. Real love, real connection, real belonging will never require you to abandon yourself. When you recognize these patterns, when you see the Charm-Disarm Cycle for what it is, when you stop apologizing for emotions that deserve to be heard, when you refuse to carry blame that was never yours to hold, you take back your power. You step out of the fog and back into clarity, and that clarity will change everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize manipulation disguised as love, you stop mistaking it for something you need to hold on to. And once you understand that real love allows you to breathe instead of walking on eggshells, you start choosing relationships that don't just make you feel wanted, but make you feel safe. So if this message speaks to you, if you're realizing that you've been shrinking, doubting, or questioning yourself in the presence of someone else's manipulation, I want you to hear this. You are not too much, you are not imagining things, and you are not alone. You have the right to trust yourself, to honor your emotions, to walk away from love that makes you feel small, and toward the kind of love that allows you to be fully seen. And when you do that, when you stand in your truth, no matter how uncomfortable it feels at first, that's when you reclaim the life you deserve. Good luck. You've got this.